We think of the past as brutal. No AC, no fans, no refrigeration, just sweating peasants baking under the medieval sun. But here's the twist. They weren't dropping dead from heat stroke like we are today. Modern cities melt under heat waves. Asphalt radiates like a furnace. Glass towers trap heat like greenhouses. Our homes hum with machines just to keep us cool. And when the power goes out, so do we. But medieval people, they built with stone, clay, and earth. They knew the angle of the sun, the direction of the wind, the silence of shade, and they used it intuitively, relentlessly, to stay alive. There were no thermostats, but there was survival, and it wasn't passive. It was engineered, generation after generation. So the real question isn't how they endured the heat, it's how we became so fragile to it. As our modern cooling systems strain under climate extremes, maybe it's time to turn around and look backward, not with nostalgia, but with precision. What ancient tricks have we buried? What knowledge did we lose when we traded resilience for convenience? Because somewhere in the dirt floor homes, the stone walls, and the shaded courtyards of the past lies a forgotten blueprint for surviving heat without a single watt of electricity. And in the next section, we'll start where they did, with the very walls that surrounded them. Walls that didn't fight the heat. They absorbed it, redirected it, and helped people live within nature, not against it. Architecture that breathed. Step into a medieval village, and you won't find drywall or insulation foam. You'll find walls made of stone, timber frames packed with wattle and daub, a blend of clay, straw, and soil. Roofs weren't synthetic tiles. They were sod-covered or thatched, alive with moss, sometimes even wildflowers. To the modern eye, it looks crude, but to the climate, it was a kind of genius. Thick stone walls don't just stand tall, they regulate temperature. In summer, they absorb daytime heat and release it slowly, preventing indoor spaces from turning into ovens. Straw and earth insulate, keeping homes cool during the day and warmer at night. Air moved slowly. Light filtered in softly. These weren't houses, they were living, breathing systems. Now contrast that with today's buildings, concrete jungles, glass towers, and steel frames that trap and radiate heat like kilns. Our cities are heat islands, our homes dependent on mechanical systems just to function. The materials we use today are fast, cheap, and efficient, but thermally blind. They fight nature instead of working with it. Medieval architecture wasn't an accident. It evolved in constant dialogue with the land. Builders knew which walls should face the sun, how to shape a roof to catch the breeze, how thick a wall needed to be to resist the summer heat. It was sustainable, self-regulating, and repairable, not because of ideology, but necessity. When comfort becomes the enemy of sustainability, systems collapse. The medieval world built for survival, not for convenience. And as temperatures rise and power grids buckle, their approach feels less like history and more like prophecy. In the next section, we go underground to explore how medieval people used the cool embrace of the earth to survive the hottest months, not just in storage, but in how they lived. The deep earth cool. The deeper you dig, the cooler it gets. Medieval people knew this not from science textbooks, but from survival. Beneath the earth, they found their answer to the relentless summer heat. Root cellars weren't just food pantries, they were thermal sanctuaries. Dug into hillsides or built below cottages, these spaces could stay 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the scorching air above. In some regions, entire rooms were carved into the earth, storing not only perishables, but offering a place to retreat when the heat became unbearable. We think of medieval peasants as unsophisticated, but this was low-tech geoengineering, cooling powered by physics, not fossil fuel. Some estates and monasteries even had ice houses, deep, shaded pits where winter ice was packed in straw and preserved for use months later. These were the elite's version of air conditioning, long before Freon or compressors existed. Today, we depend on refrigerators, freezers, and AC units. But this convenience comes at a cost: soaring energy consumption, grid dependence, and a growing vulnerability when systems fail. In the medieval world, there were no plugs, no thermostats, and yet it kept cool. These techniques weren't glamorous, but they worked. They were sustainable, scalable, and shockingly modern in their logic. As we face an overheating planet, maybe the future isn't up in the cloud. Maybe it's underground. In the next section, we climb back into the open air to see how medieval builders didn't just rely on materials, they engineered air itself. Through careful design, they caught the wind and turned it into survival. Ventilation systems without electricity. Air was a silent architect in the medieval world. Without fans or thermostats, people learned to harness the invisible, to weave wind into the very bones of their homes. Cross-ventilation wasn't theory, it was instinct. Builders aligned windows opposite one another to pull in cool breezes and flush out warm air. Narrow slits weren't just for defense. They channeled airflow, creating jets of movement through thick stone walls. Chimneys didn't only release smoke, they created a vacuum, drawing hot air up and out, letting cooler air slip in from below. Even towers weren't just status symbols. Their height invited air movement, catching wind above tree lines and funneling it downward into living quarters. Wind was trapped, redirected, whispered through hallways and hearths, all without a single moving part. Today, we seal our buildings tight. Glass boxes shut out the weather. Artificial air churns 24/7, burning energy to imitate what nature once gave for free. And when the power goes out, the illusion collapses. Medieval builders didn't fight the climate. They invited it in, but on their turn. Their homes breathed, flexed, and flowed with the seasons. It wasn't luxury, it was survival. And it raises a question: what if intelligence isn't in adding more machines, but in needing fewer? In the next section, we'll see how they took this partnership with nature even further, using one of the most powerful cooling forces available: water. But not in the way you expect. Water as the original air conditioner. In the medieval world, water wasn't just for drinking or washing. It was a tool for controlling temperature. Where there was heat, there was water working quietly against it. In the cities of Islamic Spain, narrow canals snaked through courtyards, shaded by trees and flowing past tiled walls. The water wasn't stagnant. It moved, shimmered, and breathed cool into the air. Fountains didn't just decorate gardens. They atomized moisture, allowing the breeze to carry a whisper of chill across sun-baked stone. In monasteries and castles across Europe, hand-dug moats and channels served more than defense. They regulated temperature. Living quarters were often built near water, and windows positioned to catch its cooling breath. It was evaporative cooling, a natural process. As water turned to vapor, it took heat with it. Simple, powerful, free. Today, we bury rivers under highways. Cities chase clean lines and efficient drainage. Urban design has become an enemy of comfort, stripping out the very elements that once made summer survivable. We've replaced canals with concrete, fountains with vents. Medieval designers didn't just live beside water, they lived with it. Their spaces were engineered to sense and amplify its cooling force. The architecture breathed moisture and exhaled relief. Now, as temperatures climb and cities swelter, we have to ask, what did we pave over in the name of progress? In the next section, we'll look to the treetops, not just for shade, but for shelter, insulation, and nature's oldest cooling partner, living greenery itself. Vines, trees, and natural cover. Shade in the medieval world wasn't built, it was grown. Trees were not ornamental. They were placed with surgical intent. Large, deciduous trees were planted on the sun-facing sides of cottages and courtyards, offering deep shade in summer, while allowing light through bare branches in winter. Vines like ivy or grape were trained to crawl up stone walls, shielding them from direct sun and cooling the masonry beneath. Every leaf was a living tile in nature's roofing system. Some rooftops weren't just thatched, they were gardened. Sod roofs, layered with turf and shallow-rooted plants, acted as natural insulation. They absorbed sunlight, cooled the air, and even soaked up rain. A medieval green roof, long before the term existed. This wasn't landscaping, it was climate control. Self-repairing, oxygen-generating, biodiverse cooling machines rooted in place. No maintenance contracts, no energy bill. Now, zoom out to today. Endless rows of sun-baked suburbs, plastic lawns, and treeless developments where the only shade comes from artificial awnings. We've built heat traps, not homes. The genius of medieval design was its integration. Architecture and ecology weren't rivals, they were allies. These communities didn't just survive under the sun, they partnered with the living world to soften it. Their cooling systems grew taller with each passing year. So, the question stands, when did we stop planting our infrastructure? In the next section, we'll move from the landscape to the body itself, because surviving heat wasn't just about homes or trees, it was about what people wore, and how clothing became an unexpected weapon against the sun. Clothing as climate armor. It sounds insane to modern ears. Wool in summer? But for medieval people, clothing wasn't just protection from the elements. It was the technology. Wool, especially in looser weaves, has a secret. It breathes. It wicks sweat, insulates from external heat, and even provides UV protection. Combined with linen, lightweight, moisture-absorbing, and fast-drying, this fabric duo created a kind of passive cooling system worn directly on the skin. Peasants, laboring in the fields, often layered loosely, not to suffocate, but to shield. Their clothes created pockets of air that allowed sweat to evaporate slowly, cooling the body without stripping it of hydration. It was crude, it was brilliant. Now compare that to modern synthetics. Tight polyester gymmer shirts that trap heat,
wick too quickly, and block airflow. Our high-tech fabrics often ignore the biology they're meant to support. Medieval people didn't have fashion industries. They had climate instincts. Every stitch was functional, not cosmetic, and they understood, even without the word, thermoregulation. Maybe that's the irony. In our quest to out-engineer nature, we've started to ignore it, but their survival depended on it. And while clothing helped control the heat on the body, the real secret weapon wasn't what they wore. It was when they moved. Next, we uncover how medieval life was timed around the sun, and how reshaping your schedule could be the most powerful cooling method of all.
Daily routines of heat avoidance. Before clocks ruled our lives, the sun did. Medieval people didn't fight the midday heat. They scheduled around it. Laborers rose in the cool hush of dawn, when mist still clung to the fields. They worked while shadows stretched long, then retreated during the brutal midday sun. Rest wasn't laziness, it was survival. Meals, prayer, and even trade were timed to the rhythm of heat and light. In southern Europe, entire towns would fall silent during the hottest hours. Markets closed, streets emptied. The body needed shade, and so did the mind. Then, as the sun dipped low, life restarted. Evening wasn't just for winding down. It was a second shift. Today, we cram productivity into a fixed 9 to 5. Glass offices roast under the sun, while workers sweat through deadlines. Air conditioners hum as we force ourselves to ignore what our ancestors embraced, nature's timing. Time in the medieval world was flexible. It bent with the season, adjusted with the weather, and responded to the body. It wasn't dominated by output. It was guided by survival. This wasn't inefficiency. It was wisdom. So what happens when we abandon natural rhythms? What do we lose when every hour is treated the same, regardless of the heat pounding outside? In the next section, we turn inward, because medieval people didn't just cool their homes or schedules. They cooled their bodies from the inside out, using foods, drinks, and herbal knowledge long forgotten. Fermentation, hydration, and cooling from within. In the medieval heat, survival didn't stop at architecture or timing. It went inside the body. And what people drank could mean the difference between endurance and collapse. Forget modern sports drinks. Medieval hydration came from fermented, nutrient-rich beverages like kvass, small beer, or diluted vinegar tonics. These drinks weren't just safe alternatives to questionable water. They were cooling systems in a cup, slightly fizzy, lightly alcoholic, and rich in minerals. They acted like natural electrolyte solutions, replenishing salt lost through sweat and helping the body regulate heat. Herbs were another hidden weapon. Mint, sage, elderflower, cooling in nature, were steeped into teas or crushed into pastes. They didn't just refresh the mouth, they calmed the body from within. In warmer climates, people chewed fennel or added cucumber to meals for their internal chill. Compare that to today: sugar-loaded sodas, caffeinated energy drinks, and plastic bottles filled with ultra-processed hydration science that can often dehydrate us more than they help. Our bodies, like our buildings, are being pushed to adapt to systems that work against them. Medieval people didn't have nutritionists, but they had tradition. They passed down cooling wisdom through recipes, rituals, and seasonal habits. They ate and drank with the weather, not in spite of it. Cooling wasn't just about avoiding heat. It was about preparing the body to handle it.
And now, as we reach the final section, we must ask the biggest question of all. Were these just clever tricks of a bygone era, or a blueprint we're finally ready to rediscover? Did they know something we don't? We like to think of the past as primitive, dark, dirty, uncomfortable. But if that's true, why did medieval people, with no machines, no electricity, and no modern science, survive heat we now call deadly? Their homes breathed, their routines flowed with the sun, their clothes worked with the body, their food and drink regulated temperature from the inside out, and they did it all without fossil fuels, plastic, or precision-engineered tech. They weren't building for luxury. They were building for continuity, for generation, for resilience. Today, our survival depends on grids we barely understand, machines we can't repair, and systems that fail when we need them most. We've built a world of comfort, but also of fragility. So here's the question: did we gain progress or lose wisdom? This isn't just nostalgia. It's a wake-up call. Medieval cooling wasn't perfect, but it was adaptive. It didn't require endless energy. It required attention, observation, cooperation with nature, not domination over it. As the world grows hotter, more volatile, more uncertain, maybe the solutions aren't all ahead of us. Maybe they're buried in the walls of an old cottage, beneath the sod of a living roof, or whispered through the stone halls of a monastery built to stay cool without power. Your ancestors lived through centuries of heat, drought, and instability, with nothing but what they could grow, build, or remember. And they didn't just survive, they built civilizations. So now we turn to you. Could you survive the heat without a button to press? Or is it time we start listening to the past before the future leaves us behind?